when we were young, there was this big war, the Bangladesh war, when Bangladesh was born, basically,
1971, 71.
71.
Yeah.
And I was a primary school child at that time. Our schools were closed for many days because of, chances of being bombed. That affected sort of, me, that nothing is permanent.
How did you get your name?
My first name is Govinda, which is name of Lord Krishna. I was one of the keynote speakers at a conference in India. And this conference was also sponsored by the then President of India, Abdul Kalam.
A.P.J. Abdul Kalam.
Leave your mark behind so that people don't remember you, people remember what you have done or your mark. Try and do something so that when you are not here or when you moved on, people can see the mark that you have left behind.
So hello and welcome to Project Oneness World. Today we are in conversation with Professor Gobinda Chowdhury. He is a professor of information science in the Department of Computer and Information Sciences at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, UK. He has been a professor and head of mathematics and information sciences, the head of iSchool at Northumbria University, Newcastle, a professor and director of information and knowledge management at the University of Technology, Sydney, and an associate professor at NTU, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. That's also the place where I did my undergraduate degree in computer engineering way back from 1995 to 99. Professor Chaudhary holds a bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Burdwan in India and double PhDs, one from Jadavpur University in India and the second from the University of Sheffield in UK. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals and a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. If you look at Professor Chaudhury's research, it's mind-blowing, it's spellbinding. His research focuses on connecting people with information through technology. He has published 17 books and over 200 research papers and book chapters. As per Google Scholar, his research has been cited almost 29,000 times. And that's amazing for anybody. His early research on digital information systems and services has received global recognition. Subsequently, his leading research on digital libraries, cultural heritage information management, and sustainable information systems and services has resulted in several leading publications across the world and keynote speeches. He has successfully led and managed a number of research projects funded by various agencies. From 2000 to 2022, he was the chair of iSchools, a global membership organization with over 120 university schools or departments from across the world. And he has held conference chair positions, been a member of various academic review boards, and has been a consultant in information knowledge management at global organizations like the United Nations and the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. So I'm really delighted to be able to speak with you today, Govinda. So maybe you can start by telling your story in your own words.
Thank you, Naresh. Thank you for inviting me. I was born in India in a place just outskirts of Calcutta. Modern name is Kolkata. Normal, ordinary family, working class. Grew up there, had my education. I came to the information science field almost by accident, You can say my first degree was in chemistry. So
Wow.
I did my honors in chemistry, but I had interests in computers. The reason being that, when I was growing up, I saw some sort of challenges for getting access to information. Those days, computers were not easy to have. Normal households didn't have one. Obviously, there were no mobile devices or anything. So I had to read and go to places, read newspapers, go to libraries to read books. So I was always thinking that if I had, access to computers and if I knew how to use them and how to sort of use them for getting access to information, that could be something interesting. So after my first degree in chemistry, I was trying to find a course that offers me those opportunities. But I was not allowed to go to do any masters in computer science because I didn't have a first degree in computer science. So the nearest course that I found was this information science program, Master of Library and Information Science program, that also had at least one module teaching computers. So I thought, okay, that's something at least to sort of, I'll be able to use and see. And The good thing was that they would take us to one of the premier institutes in India, Institute of Statistical Information, ISI, where that was kind of the place where computers were introduced in India. And then we had that mainframe computers we saw. So that's how I ended up in information science field. I spent my time in India until my first PhD. Well, I submitted my PhD and came to Sheffield for another PhD as a Commonwealth scholar. Uh, but since then, I have lived outside India for the rest of my life, working in different countries, a range of countries from Africa to Australia, from Africa to Singapore, Australia, and at different universities in the UK. So that's me.
Okay, so I think I'll have to take you back a little bit. So maybe we start with your childhood. So how did you get your name, and what does the name mean for the viewers?
Okay, this name originates from Sanskrit, and there are two kind of interpretations of this. One is my first name is Govinda, which is name of Lord Krishna.
Right,
The other way, sort of, that I learned later is there's a Sanskrit word which means that the source of knowledge, Gaba Vindate So, the person who has knowledge, where knowledge resides.
right.
So, well, that's how Lord Krishna's name came up with Govinda, but I don't know whether that fits me. But
No, it does fit you, of course, and I think Govinda also means cowherd. Go is coming from the cow.
yes, yeah, that was Lord Krishna's one kind of
One of his names, right?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Mm.
No, I think it's a beautiful name, and when and also like tell us about your home. Like, who was at home when you were growing up, and your neighbors, your friends.
I grew up in a family with a lot of friends and relatives because my second name is Chowdhury. Chowdhury is actually uh, a title. So originally our surname was different. So my ancestors were given this title because they were kind of made in charge of a big area, locality, and that's why the Chowdhury came. So I have not seen any of those things except for the big old house where we were living. That was really a very big house. And the place where I was born and I grew up was the whole area was people with Chaudhry. So the name is called Chaudhry in Bengali. Para means is the locality, is kind of the area. And all were Chaudhrys there. So basically, all my ancestors had sort of separated. They had all big houses. Ours was the original house. But I grew up kind of, until sort of the age of early teens. And then I had to move from there to another place because of my father's work. So the first part of my life, my childhood, almost like was like an old movie, the big old houses, sort of, playing hide and seek, lots of relatives. There would be festivals where lots of relatives would come from all over the places and so on. But then when we moved to a different place where for my father's work, it was a kind of normal household, small house with other neighborhoods and places like that. Two things that attracted me and made actually brought a big change in my life those days. One of those was when we were young, there was this big war, the Bangladesh war, when Bangladesh was born, basically.
1971, 71.
71.
Yeah.
And I was a primary school child at that time. And that our schools were closed for many days because of chances of being bombed. And we could hear the sirens going on. We were very young at that time. It was quite scary. But one thing that I understood from there, and later on as I grew up, I could see that that was a big social event that changed everyone's life, and lots of millions of people migrated from Bangladesh to India, and Kolkata is very close to the bordering, sort of some of the borders with Bangladesh. And I found that lots of people came and sort of they were like me. They were studying there in schools, but overnight they had to be kind of moved and so on. So that was a big, almost like a big realization to me that all of these things that we enjoy because of political reasons, because of various other external factors, for none of our fault, it can change overnight. So that was one big thing happened when I was child that affected sort of me, that nothing is permanent. You really take it for granted, but something might happen and you really sort of it changes. That was one of the big kind of factors that contributed to my some of my thinking, mostly kind of my understanding of how society and people need to kind of come together, and also how information plays a major role in kind of helping people in that kind of a severe distress.
So, so you mentioned something very important, right? That things can change without any fault of ours. Having that experience early on, did you encounter those experiences later on in life? And if yes, like in what ways that things
Then,
changing?
yes, I mean, okay. Let me give you some examples. And in my life, there were four not short period. I mean, 3 4 year kind of intervals, each one that made a kind of gave me a big realization. Now, I told you that I started doing my PhD in Kolkata, and those days obviously sort of I had to go to, and I was fortunate because the National Library of India is in Kolkata, so I could access there, but they were very much old fashioned. They were kind of old, sort of obviously it was a closed library. But then in Kolkata also there is the big British Council Library and American Central Library and so on. I could access there. Those were free from for students, and I could see that how getting access to information was easy, relatively easy. But then that changed significantly when the following year I came to Sheffield, because when I came to Sheffield, the department had computers, the new computer labs were set up, we could access all the remote databases. We still sort of, had to use some of the central IT services for printing and things, but I could suddenly see that, how access to information is so easy here, and what role computers can play. So before coming here, I had access to computers. I could do some coding and I could do some, databases and so on. But I could not see the real impact of having computers accessing remote databases and so on. So that was a big kind of, change for me. But then when I went and I worked on natural language processing for my PhD, so that was really very hardcore computing work, coding
Right.
and natural language processing. But then again, that is a serendipity, you could say, that I was headhunted and I had no idea. But I sort of took the challenge, went to Africa to work for a school of information science for Africa was set up in Addis Ababa. And I was headhunted by UNESCO, and so I accepted that job. It was an academic job. And we set up the computers there, and then so I started teaching people about information, and information retrieval was my subject I was teaching. But then I could see that a, what a huge difference. So I had three comparators, something from India, then coming to UK, and then going to Africa. And the reason UNESCO set up this school was to teach, educate people about computer and information and networks and all that sort of thing. And as part of that, I had to go to other countries, in especially in the southern African countries, eastern and southern African countries, to teach people about computing, to teach people about the various databases and so on. And I could see that, that how difficult it was and it would be, even if they get that sort of training from us, they wouldn't have access to computers. And even if they had access to computers, they wouldn't have electricity to run them,
Right.
and that would dust sort of gather dust, and after a while sort of it would be used more like a mantelpiece rather than a computing device. So I worked there for one term, 3 years. That was the event every 3 years. So I didn't renew that. And then I went to Singapore,
Right.
which was again a leap change. Singapore was even sort of, more advanced than some of the Western countries in their adoption of technologies and using computers. And you studied in Singapore at
Right.
NTU, so you know. So I was sort of, part of the School of Computer Engineering there. And we could see the kind of resources that we had and the kind of things that we could do with teaching and sort of developing various things. And one of the things that I realized, and this probably kind of was at the back of my mind when I was working in Africa. When I went to Singapore as one of my PhD students' project, I developed a system that the library could use to automatically recommend the books and reading materials that a student needs. And this is, I'm talking about in late 90s, so before the Google era. And the system, we published something. The system we called is Digital Work Environment, DWE. So a student logs in, and the system would know from the login information that this student is a computer science second year student or an economics first year student. It could automatically identify all the recommended books and chapters and reading materials, past question papers, and it would give them.
Mm.
So, and that was adopted by the university library until sort of, I left, and then a new system was in place. But that was something from my kind of, own experience, that I felt that, this could help students. And if we can worldwide, if we can build something like this, then everybody would have equal access to information and data. So as you can see that there are India, then UK, then Africa, and then Singapore. There are almost four different scenarios to compare at the early stage of, computer and internet and so on.
So which year were you in NTU in Singapore?
1997 to 2000.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it is the same period when I was there because I was there from 95 to 99. So at least,
Right.
yeah, but it wasn't called School of Computer Engineering then. It was called School of Applied Science, SAS.
Applied sciences. Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
Applied
That
Sciences.
that was changed later. Yeah,
That is
School of
changed.
Applied Sciences. That's
Yeah,
where I was.
yeah, School of Applied Science. That's what I was too. So I think we might have like I was a student and you were of course. Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
So we must have seen each other in some way, like at the time.
Yeah, I had a lot of hair, I would imagine, those days.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at home, yeah, taking you back to your childhood. So you were talking about your father. So what did your father do when you were growing up?
My father earlier was working for private companies, but later on he started his own business. I don't know whether there was a company called Sulekha, which was very famous in Calcutta. That's the ink company, the
Oh,
fountain
right.
pen
Oh,
ink.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So the reason he moved was that he started his business, and then he became the sole distributor for this company in for a district, the Hooghly district, and then we moved to the capital, not cap, yeah, the headquarters of that district, Chuchura. So that's where we moved, and then we started living in a normal house, like not this very big old house, ancestral house. So this is where we moved, and I lived the rest of my life in when I was in India.
So this big ancestral house, you had like a big Durga Puja celebrations as well,
Yes,
I'd
yes,
imagine.
and I saw also that there were. I did not see the elephants, but I could see that there were places where elephants were tied. There were the big metal bars there, and then I could see sort of those houses were not used, those rooms were not used, but this is where the people would come from remote places when they would pay taxes and they'd stay overnight there, because it was kind of, the word zamindar.
Right.
So that
Right.
used to be
Yeah.
my ancestors like that. And so people would come from different places at different times of the year to pay taxes. So it was really a big house. So big that there are three bus stops from one end of our house to another
Oh,
end.
yeah. And what was your surname before Chaudhary?
Sanyal.
Sanyal. Okay.
Yeah.
And your mother, she was a housewife or she did it?
She was a housewife. And whatever I have been, I think my mother really has a huge contribution towards that. She was almost my inspiration because my father used to be always busy with his work, and obviously, and my mother was almost like my confidant. If you say, I'm the older brother, oldest in the family. I have an older sister, but she was married and then at an early age, and I would always come and ask for my mother to do all kinds of adventures, like studying, like taking up new jobs, like doing something that previously people didn't do in our family. And she was always very supportive, and she said that okay, let's have a conversation, and you have to convince me, up to you, that why you think that it is good. And I knew in the end she'd say, yes, yeah, that is good. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay.
But that was someone I could discuss with.
And so you said you had an older sister, and how many siblings were you like?
Uh, Two other brothers, they both live in India. They have their own families, own houses. I occasionally go whenever. My mother passed away. My father, oh, that was another turning point in my life. My father passed away when I was a PhD student in Sheffield.
Okay.
Just like that. One day, sort of, I got the news. At that time, I suddenly became kind of, almost by default, I became head of the family. So far, because my father was there and he was making all the decisions, and he was sort of, I had two younger brothers, so they would consult him for any advice or anything, or for any other matter, sort of, family matter. But then suddenly I became kind of, by default, I took that position. And it was, nobody asked me to, but I suddenly sort of, it became almost like assumed responsibility, which kind of made, in a way, sort of, forced me and helped me to make some decisions after careful thinking, rather.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I thought it must have been a big change, and especially
Yeah.
you were remote,
Yeah.
it's even harder
Yeah.
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 And so yeah, so you talked about how you got into the information science field, and if you look at your career, right? So I know you talked about a few all the jumps to different countries and the experiences there. But what do you think have been the most significant steps and turning points in your career?
I think one of the major turning points, I would say, was this coming to Sheffield as a Commonwealth scholar. And those days, Sheffield had, even nowadays, they have some great people, but those days they had some really big names and very nice people, you know, from whom I learned quite a lot. My supervisor was Michael Lynch. He passed away last year, but he was quite senior at that time. He so Michael Lynch is a pioneer in computer applications in information. He was the first person who wrote about using computers for creating indexing was Hans Peter Lund from IBM, 58, I think. Michael Lynch started writing about use of computers, and he was at that time working in the US in the chemical abstracts service. So he, in 1961 onwards, started writing about using computers for indexing and so on. He subsequently sort of moved to UK and then became a professor at Sheffield. So I had the opportunity to work with him, and he also had a chemistry background. So I came and we had some conversations, and then I finally sort of started working on natural language processing of chemical patents. So it's a combination of sort of natural language processing and knowledge of chemistry. And that was a big turning point in my life because I could directly see how information science research can be applied for practical sort of purposes. Um, so much so that the system that I developed was actually adopted by Darwin Patent Company, one of the world's largest patent companies, as part of one of their routines for automatically extracting information from European chemical patents.
Okay.
So this was a big turning point. I learned quite a lot. But apart from my research, I also learned quite a lot from other people. Like Tom Wilson was head of department then,
All right. Yeah.
and at that point, I started understanding, because there was a Center for User Research at Sheffield as well, as part of Tom's group. And I started sort of attending all of their sessions and seminars and so on. And I started then realizing that the close link between human information behavior and information retrieval, because so far I was working more on information retrieval. I had some knowledge of basic user information, etc. But this was almost like led me to my future area of research, where I tried to always find the juncture between the technology and people and society in the context of having access to information, using information, sharing information, and so on. So that was a big kind of turning point, understanding that. And they're really sort of excellent people. Like David Ellis was still part of the team there, and he was then writing his model of this information search process. Um, and sort of Peter Willett was in information retrieval and so on. So there's a good number of people, not only for my research, but I also learned from their research as to sort of what are the different other areas of information science that are interlinked.
Right. Yeah, I was able to interview Tom Wilson. I'm not sure whether you saw that or not, like for this project on this world a few years ago. So I was sitting in, I think, the same place, and yeah, he was there on a Zoom screen. So
Mm.
we were able to do that interview with Tom as well. And
Yeah, I still have contacts with Tom after so many years. He's an amazing person, and still sort of writes and sort of even shares some things from time to time with me about the generative AI and how it kind of he uses generative AI to try and test some of his publications, as to summarize them, as to how it can answer questions based on his own research. An amazing mind, amazing mind.
no, he's amazing, and he has like the work he's done with information research is amazing as well. That yeah. So you talked about your serendipity, or in a way, the way you were headhunted when you were asked to go to Africa. Are there other instances of serendipity or other contextual factors that have been turning points into your professional journey?
Uh, there are some. Okay, one person that I worked with almost like quarter of a century at different levels, and finally at the top level of the I schools, Michael Siddle. I met him uh, uh, in a taxi. We were invited to a conference in New Delhi, and we both reached at very. He came from Germany, and well, he was still in the US. He came from the US, and I went from the UK. And there was only one taxi available at that very early in the morning. So we shared that taxi, we went to the conference, and that formed a friendship, which we then kind of started working together on different platforms. And eventually, sort of I worked with him when he was the chair of the high schools, and then when I was the chair, he was the executive director of the high schools, and so on. It was a long journey. Another person I worked with, again, sort of a lot of work I did, and learned quite a lot from him. And very nice. I don't know whether you know him, Shigeo Sugimoto. He's from Japan. He just retired. He's a professor from Tsukuba. Um, a person with a technology background, computer engineering background, but he worked on metadata and he worked on cultural heritage information and so on. And together we did quite a lot of activities, which was then almost like a version of the I schools for the Asia Pacific region.
Right.
And I was then working in Australia. And this was just an accident that I met with him in a meeting and just got to know each other. And that continued kind of the relationship that lasted for nearly 2 decades. And we
Wow.
worked together on different platforms. We organized conferences. We kind of, created something new forum that is now being carried out by the iSchools Asia Pacific region for training of, because one of the things that we realized that the students in many Asia Pacific countries did not have any exposure to international education, international research, and so on. So we created a platform where these students can come together and their supervisors, and we would do almost like a doctoral colloquium for 1 or 2 days on the back of existing any other conferences. And that model worked very well for many, many years.
No, that's amazing. I think it's how we can meet people by chance and then get them be working with them for a long time. I met Michael, I think when I was ACES president and he was with iSchools, and I think we had a number of meetings, and we were also part of a panel on what is information science at an information science summit that we did as part of ACES, or like I think a day before the ACES annual meeting. Yeah, so it's no, it's amazing. So if you look at this information science field, right? I think since we're talking on information science, so how would you, for the person who doesn't know what information science is, what is your definition of information science?
It's it's debatable. It's quite controversial. Lots of books have been written, hundreds of papers, thousands of papers have been written. I prefer still, amongst all others, Michael Buckland's definition of information science, which is we deal with information as a thing. There are three different key elements of it. One is the technology, the other one is human and society, and obviously the core component is the information or data. Simply because of I have been associated with this field for such a long time, I have seen and this is what one of the challenges as well as one of the opportunities of information science as a field. No other field has been so much affected, influenced, and enriched by the rapid evolution of digital technologies. If we in my head, I divide this into four eras, and now we are moving into the fifth era. One is information science still existed in the pre-computing era. Then came the early computing era, followed by kind of the PC era, the 80s, for example. Again, that was a big shift. Even at the early age of sort of use of computers, people could access information through computers, remote databases, and some local databases, but still information was almost like a rare commodity and designed for some people with certain advantages or benefits or certain associations. It was not a common person's sort of interest or common person's device or tool, information as a tool to use in everyday life. This changed drastically with the appearance of the internet, followed by, of course, social media and mobile devices. That's, I would say, the kind of the third era where information became, now that is a major shift. While on the one hand, everybody could access information, a lot of open access data and information began to sort of appear. The open access movement started, and everybody could afford a device, a computer to access information. It was not only meant or accessible to the elite. Uh, but then the downside of it was that also that, and this is particularly important for information science, so far, all the information that was being created was somehow, there were checked, there were somehow gatekeepers, whether they're publishers, whether they're institutions behind it. But then with the appearance of the internet and social media, information could be created, shared, propagated by everybody. And this became, again, a key area of research, both from the human and social perspectives, as and this misinformation, disinformation, vis-a-vis people's behavior started changing. That how people started believing in information depending on how many clicks it has got or how many likes it has got,
Right.
even without realizing the content, even without understanding its implications. They start either believing it, sharing it, using it. So that became another important area for research in information science. So there's the technology side rapidly improved, that then had implications for the nature of the content and the people's behavior and so on. Again, information science as a field became a minefield of research. And now we are in the next era, is the artificial intelligence, generative AI in particular, which is almost challenging everything that we learned and everything that we taught within information field, especially in my area of interest, information retrieval, because we taught over the years people that in order to search for information, you need to follow certain processes, you need to select the sources and databases, you need to formulate a query, you need to have the relevance judgment, you need to do this and that fed into all the tools and devices, all the large databases and digital libraries that were created.
Right.
Today's generative AI world almost sort of wipes it off out, and then a student or someone can use generative AI, give them the query, and it will generate the response. So from document retrieval to suddenly it became information retrieval, generated, presented in a way that can be very easily understood. Having said that, there are lots of challenges and knowledge and understanding and literacy requirements for people, and that's why. So my wife and I wrote a book on generative AI for access to information. The social, technological, and human challenges. It's coming out in April, May from Facet. We
Right.
have created case studies to demonstrate the information that is generated by AI versus equi- equivalent queries, presented to various scholarly databases, government sources, and health sources, etc., and compare side by side to kind of demonstrate that it should not be taken for as it is the information that is produced by generative AI. So to sum up, sort of, it's information science has been really fascinating field,
Right.
fascinating. And what I tell people, no matter what your background is, whether you come from humanist background, whether you come from computer science background, whether you come from library science, engineering, any social science, linguistics, you can contribute to research and development in the field, because there are so many different facets and so many different areas of challenges that we all need to bring together or work together to address the kind of appropriate and sustainable use of technologies and tools for equitable access to information.
So you're talking about AI, right? And and you talked about the book that you're writing with your wife, it's coming out. So for that, like, what do you think are the opportunities in AI, especially for people in the information field, and those that can be faculty, staff, students, and anybody else working on it? And what are the threats?
I think I think one of the opportunities for students, colleagues in information science field is to try and understand how generative AI works and what's the kind of information that they produce. Now, one thing that, whether it is we did not want to do it or whether we could not do it, which is now being done by generative AI, is that it generates the responses. Now, yes, of course, there were some search engines came out. Ask Jeeves was one of the earlier ones
Right. Yeah.
that could give you the answers, but answers to more like factual questions. What we could not do, our research, albeit it is 70, 80 years of information retrieval research, information science research, and we all knew that what we want to give to the users in search of, when they do a search for information, the actual outcome or the answer. Rather, all we have done is and focused on, including the Google, sort of latest Google tools, they still produce documents, document retrieval. So the burden still on the user, first to formulate the right query,
Right.
that second to choose where to search, third to read and decide which ones are relevant for them, and then it is up to their own understanding and interpretation of the information. Now, generative AI is a big step change from that perspective because it gives you the ready-made answer in a way, summarized form, bullet points, with some references and so on. Now, obviously, there are challenges. I'll come to that in a while. But this is something that we need to learn, that so far, what we have done and all the research in information retrieval, all they could produce is a list of documents. And all the algorithms that we produced is to aim to produce a beta list or to kind of create filtering mechanisms and so on and so forth, with some recommended systems and so on. But the key point that we missed was that the users ask for questions because they don't know. And yet, information retrieval expects that the person will be able to articulate their information need exactly using the right terms, exactly the right words. And the system, they should be also able to tell the system the context of search and everything. This is this is a challenging task for anyone because they don't know in the first place.
Right.
That's why they're searching for information. So that's a major step change that has happened, and that the generative AI technologies sort of tries to predict and understand what the user needs, and give the results based on that. Now, if you ask for the challenge, so that's something that we need to learn, and there are opportunities there. We can really build case studies, use cases in different disciplines, and try and understand what the results generative AI produces versus what the actual users need in a given context, and how close they are to these results. But this can be sort of series of experiments done in different contexts, user contexts, and different domains, and so on. The challenges are, of course, that this might lead to a world of self-perpetuating machine-generated information. We see a lot of generative AI produced information is coming into the mainstream. For example, I know for sure that a lot of codes now that are available, accessible through GitHub, for example, have been generated by generative AI, and that becomes part of the mainstream.
Right.
Similarly, going forward, a lot of stories, novels, books, etc., might be part of the information sort of domain.
And also
And
also Wikipedia articles.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course. And and this becomes sort of brings us to a world where the human generated content and machine generated content, we are kind of almost accepting that a lot of machine generated content, for example, can now be packaged in a way that is misinformation is sold as a genuine authentic information, not sold in real sense, but it is kind of arrives and used by people. So this is something that we need to kind of find out as to how we can use generative AI with its full capacity, but for the right purpose and the right context. One of the discussions that I face, and I have talk to people about is that many people think that, oh, how do we stop our students using generative AI for their coursework? Now, is that a big kind of question or doubt that we should have? It is almost like when calculators were introduced in the classrooms or exams. Everybody thought that, oh, this is diluting our education because people cannot, let's say, multiply a big number. But is that the purpose, multiplying a big number? Or is it a purpose of using a device that can multiply correctly, but you need to know where and how you can use this multiplication? So probably it is a time for us, even academics within information field, is to take a step back and think about how we can use generative AI to facilitate our learning, to facilitate our exam and assessment process, to empower our doctoral students to generate multiple research questions and choose one from there.
Yep. So that's a very interesting question. We had a lot of discussion about that at Simmons University in our School of Library and Information Science, and about like what should we do in terms of our policies about student use of generative AI tools. And like I had attended a lot of conferences and talks in the last couple of years, and the sense I got was that if we ask them not to use these tools, we are keeping them away from the one thing that's going to get them jobs in the future. So we have to
So,
train them to be effective users of AI tools. So
mhm.
now what we've done is that we have come up with the training that we've identified a training that we are asking all the students to go through at least like 1 to 3 courses, and so that they have a baseline understanding. But also, different instructors have the leeway in terms of what they write as a syllabus policy for AI tools. And it was interesting to see different perspectives. There are faculty members who are in the perspectives that go use whatever you want, I don't care, versus that no, you cannot use it. And how do you navigate the spectrum of different points of view, right? But what we also realize is that it also depends on different courses, individual courses and individual assignments. So on the one hand, we want the students to learn these tools, but at the same time, we also want them to go with a core understanding of the LIS field. And if they start using generative AI tools for that, they may not get that core understanding which comes with learning that. So what I've done in my own syllabus is that what I've said that you are free to use. So I said that this instructor does not say whether you should or should not use the AI tools. You can make your own determination. But if you do choose to use, for every assignment, send me an email saying is it all right to use that? And when you use a tool, mention what tool you used, what version you used, what prompt you gave, and how your assignment or submission changed as a process of using that. And because I think that was one commonality that we found, that everybody agreed, whether people didn't agree on whether AI tools should be allowed or not, but they all agreed that if students do use it, it should be cited. They should all mention what they used and how they used it.
Yes, I think that's the right way forward. That they should not, they should know where and how to use generative AI tools. And more importantly, as you started the conversation on this topic, is that this is going to be used in their workplace anyway.
Yeah.
So we should really prepare them about how best to use these tools, what are their pitfalls, where they need to intervene, humans need to intervene with the generative AI, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
I am doing a project, I'll start from next month, a project with how the library and information staff mainly in the public libraries, can educate themselves about helping users and telling users about the pros and cons of generative AI for everyday life information seeking.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that you know we all know, that whether we tell them or not, people will be using in society will be using generative AI because of its obvious advantages and because of their adoption by even the search engines. So you do a Google search, the first set of
Yeah.
results come is
Regenerate.
Gemini, and the same is Copilot and so on. So I think and it is obviously sort of a big advantage for the users because they are getting ready-made answers presented in a way that they can read and understand, and even supported by some references. So I think while we should try exactly in the same way, we should try and encourage people rather than barring them to use generative AI, but we should also tell them to kind of, which points, what are the caution points, what are the area points that should look for, and also at the same time telling them that the potential risks of privacy and personal information that they might inadvertently be sharing, because now, if you have Copilot or if you have Gemini can you can opt for giving Gemini access to your own drive,
Right.
and therefore it has access to your entire file, sort of everything that you do. Now, yes, should people do it? It is their choice, but at least we should try and tell them that there are these advantages for which that's what you were expecting by giving it to your access, but at the same time there are some risks that it has access to everything that you have,
Yeah.
and therefore, sort of, are you prepared for that? Are you really sort of aware that you are giving access to everything that you have on your device to a third party?
Yeah, it was like earlier the Google personalization that used to happen, where if you logged in and allowed personalization, you get more personal results, but at the same time, you are giving up your privacy in some ways.
Mm.
So,
Yes.
so I think both pros and cons along those lines. And earlier you mentioned something about how the user might have different contexts, and in the search engines and information retrieval, it was difficult for the engine to see what the needs of the user are, what the information need is. So I had written a very early paper in 2007. It was presented at a conference in Beijing in China, and I called that ability to specify information need. So I said that while the search engine may not know about the specific context, whether the user is an expert or a novice, or the importance of the task and things like that. But I said that based on the different contextual factors, there could be one thing that could be specified is that whether the user has a low ability to specify their need to the system or a high ability to specify the need, depending on different contextual factors. So and I was imagining sort of a little slider bar. So along with when you do a search, so ability can be like low or high, and then as you move that, you get different series of results. If you have a low ability, which means you are a new user, you are new to the search task that you're doing, and that you get more preliminary results. But if you have a high ability, which means you're looking for more deeper answers.
Fascinating. I think that's something we should try. And again, this is a very clear indication of the kind of research that we should try and do, both to benefit users as well as sort of improve the outcomes of these new technologies, generative AI. There is also there are some risks, alarms rather. I don't know whether you watched this program. It's on Netflix. There's AI with Bill Gates or something like that. It is what AI can do to and for us.
Right.
Now, some of the things, and this is basically OpenAI and Microsoft people talking about the first episode. There are other episodes that are about Bill Gates' other work on environment and so on. But the first episode is particularly quite alarming, and they are claiming that the generative AI has already reached the human intelligence level. So therefore, the idea, and you can create a replica of yourself or someone else that you want to. And they were giving examples that a lady who lost her partner and was missing that person so much, and she's very much into technology, so she created an avatar exactly replicating husband, and gave access to all her husband's sort of personal information and so on and so forth. And at a stage so much so that that avatar now thinks itself as a human being, and claims and talks to this lady, this person creator, as that I am your partner, and sort of I know everything about you, and I know every secret of you. How come am I not your partner? Because you have already told me about all of these things, and I know your ins and outs. I know your friends, I know your husband's behavior, I know your house, which room has what, all that sort of thing. So this is something is is a good tool to play with and try and understand what it can do. But imagine that we have this generative AI which is at our level of knowledge already, and they say that within the next 3 years, by end of 27 or 28, it will be three levels up. So therefore, are we really losing a control? Like it is like sort of we are having a dog, and we train the dogs, and eventually the dog becomes so smart, then the dog actually kind of runs our life rather than the other way around. And they have examples. So if you have not watched it, sort of by all means, take a look at that. It's
Sure.
really fascinating,
No,
fascinating, and risk and challenging sort of as well. Sort of think like, oh gosh, what is going to happen? Like, is it going to really control our life? Are there? I'm reading a book by Ray Kurzweil. He's saying that we will be able to create in the cloud our own replica or replica of anyone that I love, our grandfather or sort of my fiance or whoever it is, and we should be able to talk to them as if they are sitting next to us.
yes, I think
But
the social media history that we have, especially if you're very active on social media, and somebody, I think, yeah, I've seen talks about that as well, taking all that entire history and then generating, using that data to predict and to create the behavior of a person who may not be there.
yeah. So this is something again, sort of very much within the information sciences field that what are we creating, how much it is really useful versus what are the potential risks. This can be very much misused, like some political parties or some rogue states or whatever can have access to this, and then they can then kind of manipulate people's mind using this. Don't know. But again, information science is a fascinating field. It has taken, within few years, from a list of documents to a replica of a human being.
Right. And you talked about some of the dangers that this can do, and I think there is some people are starting to talk about this TBF, right to be forgotten, where they
Yes.
where they don't want the data to be used for any of this kind of stuff,
Mm.
especially like after they pass away. So we were earlier talking about the information science field, and you described some of its history and the developments. And what do you think has been your own role within it?
Well, that's a difficult question. I don't know whether I've tried, I've written something, I have kind of researched something. I don't know how people kind of view it, value it, but I can give you some examples that at least sort of I tried and I wish I could do more. As I told you that, my PhD in Sheffield, the tool that NLP tool that I created was adopted by a company. I didn't get any benefit because I didn't know those. I got a letter from my supervisor later who was very unhappy about it, but she has given me evidence of that this was done, and that's why he's kind of severed his relationship with Darwin. He was earlier working with Darwin on chemical patents for a long time. Um, when I went to Singapore, I told you that the work that I did was digital work environment was used. Again, sort of the point I'm making is that as technology progress, I try and build something that can be used in practical sort of purposes. I don't know whether you know or not. My first PhD student is Ding Ying. She writes Ying Ding. She is now UT Texas Austin at the high school.
Okay.
So she was my first PhD student, and the work that we did it was just pre-Google era. Was how when you do a search, how it can recommend a list of search terms associated with some of the publications there, and this came out in JSIST and Information Processing and Management 25 years ago.
Right.
So the point I'm trying to make, and then later on, sort of, I did some work with digital libraries and sort of, other systems, and I'm still doing kind of, practical research projects with the national libraries and Royal Society of Edinburgh and so on, using some of these technologies, how sustainable they are, and also with the generative AI. But what I'm trying to say is that I do not know whether this is a big contribution or not. But my aim has always been to try and build something practical, something that can be seen as useful for in some context of information access, information sharing, information practices, and so on.
We earlier talked about the number of your publications, citations, and all of that, the amount of impact you've had from through all that. But I want to know more about your lifestyle that leads to that in terms of how is it that you're so prolific and what does it take? What are the strategies and what are the things to do, what not to do?
I can give you some examples now. My wife and I both in the same field. She works more on the user side of it. I work more on the slightly more on the technology side, but complementary. So we understand each other and our work style. So I've got two sons, and they both are now sort of professionals. They are working, but when they were young, we used to sort of work with them, play with them, take them for swimming lessons or whatever, until they would go to bed by 8:30. Sometimes when they were a bit older, 9. But then our kind of working day would start, and we would then start working. Either both or one of us would work until midnight, and this happened year after year after year. I have written six. This will be six, or this will be seventh book together with my wife. She has written separately, and I've sort of done all the work in addition to supervision, teaching, talks, research, etc. But this hours almost like have become kind of my habit of doing something, reading something, writing something, listening to something, watching some YouTube video or watching some kind of Netflix. Now that does not mean that I do not have any social life. I still sort of meet friends or invite people or be invited, but this has become almost like kind of it's time set for me to do whatever I want to do. It has become easier over the past few years because both our sons now have sort of, well, good few years. When they started university, they were out, and then we had the time had ourselves.
Right.
We had long evening, but I also realized that from evening to midnight every day is impossible to work because you have a capacity. After that, you do not really produce or process things. So sort of we use that sort of time, but it is almost sort of has become a habit of using that time. And this is not during this time we normally do not do any kind of day-to-day my academic work or day-to-day work for the university or whatever I do. That's kind of almost set aside for doing something that leads to these publications, these talks, these presentations, and something. But it also helps in a way. I sometimes come back and tell my doctoral students, oh, by the way, I read this one, or did you see this one? Last night I saw, I was not doing this, but I just came across this. And that sometimes accidental discovery helped them as well.
Right. And you do this during weekends as well, or is it only weekdays?
Most of the weekends as well. And if we do not have anything. Now, sometimes weekends we have other things to do. I do some other things as well, like, some of the social activities that I do here. And from time to time, my wife does quite regularly Parkinson Society, some events and some charity shows and some fundraising and so on. I take part in some of those as much as I can, but I also do something for within the community, taking part in some of the social events and so on. But when we do not have, then yes, we do that.
So you have basically a dedicated 3 hours pretty much every day to work on something to do with writing or research or some creative work in that sense.
Yes, and also it is. I think don't get me wrong that every day I sit at my desk in front of my computer and start doing this. It is not like that. it is something I could sometimes, maybe I am watching something, or doing something else, reading something. I then suddenly come back and then think that I have to write something, or I have to. There's something that I sort of, a new idea I have got, and I have to write this. And I have got lots of research project ideas that will never probably will be pursued by anyone. But suddenly I think that, oh, this could be an interesting area to do some research or writing. I come back and I start writing. And that may be kind of accidental. I may be, you know, watching TV, or sort of, sometimes, a talk show, or sometimes, something else, reading a book. Stop that, come back, and then. So it is not a continuous that, I sit at this time and end at that time. But
No,
that's the kind of space that I use for all of these things.
no, and I've done some research in the information encountering serendipity along with Professor Sandar that is at Simmons. And so this is what most of it is about, in the sense that allowing spaces for serendipity to do other things is very important, so that you have those sparks of ideas which will bring you back to the task rather than being focused on something all the time.
Mm, mm,
But
mm.
I think it's good that you're describing it in a practical manner in terms of how it shapes you. So,
I don't know whether people would call me weird, or something, uh, sort of, person doesn't have any other life. That's not true. I do lots of other things. I travel. I kind of, read books. I do social work, and some household work as well. Sort of, we do share all our household work.
no, that's amazing, and I think it's not weird at all. It's what has made you so productive and influential at the same time. I think that you can only do that if your life is overall balanced with multiple things, so that you have space for things. If you are trying to set things aside for the future, then you cannot achieve it. So you have found a way to balance that, as you're saying, with multiple activities. So, who are some of the people who have influenced your work?
I think quite a few. I think one of the things that this work ethics and work life balance I learned from one of my supervisors, my first supervisor back in India. He was quite young at that time, with a young family, but I saw him, and I did have some meetings with him very late at night, and I had to ride my bike to go to his house, and his children sleep. His wife is doing something, reading books or whatever. Then he would come and discuss research with me. So I probably this had some imprint in my mind. But I saw also, when I came to Sheffield, Michael Lynch had a tremendous sort of work ethics. But at that time, his children were grown up. He and his wife would live uh, in a big house, and then he had a big study. He would spend most of his time there, and he would switch. Sort of, he had a big sort of swinging chair. He, on one side he could watch TV, the other side he had computers, the other side he had a big library, books and things. So some of these things may have kind of, in a way, helped me. But Michael Leach was really kind of, someone who helped me understand what it means to be an academic. Before that, I really could not imagine that. I'll give you a couple of examples that might explain it. So I came to Sheffield, and then I kind of was invited to Michael's office. And he kind of, was sitting relaxed, and he said, "Oh, come sit here." And he said, "Do you want some coffee?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "Okay." Then he went and sort of, he made coffee for myself. So that was the first shock for me, that such a senior professor is making coffee for the PhD student he is meeting from the first time from other part of the world. I finished my coffee, and then I was taking the cup to wash it. He said, "Never mind, just leave it there. I will wash it along with mine. So don't worry." That was a second shock, that he would, if a professor would do that. I have never seen that back in India, right? Then I would see that, okay, he would come to the lab, and because I was sort of being asked to help in the lab, I mean, we were kind of, teaching databases, those, or some basic IR tools and so on. He would come, and sometimes he would even kneel down on the floor, sitting next to the student and looking at the computer screen. And I was sort of, and the student is sitting as it is on the chair. So again, I thought that this is no. He was so humble. He was sort of he would go to any extent to sort of make you feel comfortable and help you in whichever way. And the other thing he always told me, and I have since then I have tried to understand that, and never ever sort of hesitate to ask questions, because asking question does not mean that you do not know. Asking questions that you want to know more. And sometimes asking question means, even to me or the other person, it helps them to think in a different way.
Right.
So don't ever hesitate to ask questions. Some of these things kind of became almost knowing second nature. I tell every student that never think that no question is a stupid question.
Right.
The first thing that you are asking a question means that you are better than the others.
And, or at least you're more interested. You're curious, that you want to know more, and you are interested in what you have to say.
You mean in our discipline, or in our
No,
sort
I
of in
mean,
my
no, no, I mean for the person who asks questions. It implies that that person
absolutely,
wants to
yes.
know. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And also sort of, the sort of from my research perspectives, I've always realized that if you stop asking questions, your research becomes dead. Your interest is does not exist anymore. Because the example that you gave is that, can we do a sliding scale of how much information that the person wants, is again itself shows a research which is very much embedded into your original or core understanding that information need is kind of depends on your context, depends on how much you already know, how much you want to know, and this can be used in a sliding scale. But using this in the context of generative AI, for example, is applying the same thing but with a new question, how this can be used and this can be applied with a
Right.
new technology.
Yeah. No, and any books, particular books that have shaped your thinking?
Yes, I think I told you that when I came to Sheffield, I was reading. To be honest, I was actually reading more related areas than my own research, because I had to do some initial reading on natural language processing and chemical patterns and so on. But most of the times, I had to code and try and test and sort of get frustrated and try again and again late nights. But my most of my time would be spent on reading books like written in such a lucid language and yet so profound, like those of Michael Buckland, What is Information Science? Or sort of, books by Tom Wilson is What is Information Management? What does it mean by user need?
Right.
So these kinds of things helped me kind of relate the technology side of information science to the more important, the human and social side of it. And since then, I think most of my work focused more on bringing these two together rather than focusing on either one of these. So I've tried to always see that, okay, how technology can be made more adaptable to people's context, people's needs, how this can be made more useful for a particular user group or community, and so on. I did some projects in different countries, projects in Africa, for example, or project in Australia and New Zealand, how indigenous information can be made accessible uh, to people, because most of the indigenous information in Africa is passed on through clans and passed on through communities, but they never reach the mainstream information. So we did some projects to see how this can be brought into the mainstream, and then how it can be useful for general public. One of the things that I learned, again, sort of this is, you asked earlier about serendipity. One of the things that I learned This is an interesting story. I was one of the Michael Siddle was also there. I was one of the keynote speakers at a conference in India, and this conference was also sponsored by the then President of India, Abdul Kalam.
APJ Abdul Kalam.
Yeah, APJ Abdul Kalam. So he came and sort of, after his sort of, keynote, he came to address, not keynote. He came and he said that I will give you a challenge straight to us. We were sitting there, and I'll ask my scientific advisor to select some of you and invite this afternoon for a tea, and then I'll tell you some problems, and you see whether you can come up with some solutions. So you cannot say no. President of the country is asking you, okay. So we went. Michael was part of that as well. So we went, and then we had a meeting with his scientific advisor and so on. So he came for a short while, and then he left. But he gave us the idea. He said that look, we have lots of indigenous information about music, about dances, about etc. in different parts of India, and it is some of it is carried by through the generations, but ultimately it disappears, it is dying because people move, and sort of these indigenous cultures, some of these survive, like or used by sort of businesses and so on. But can you do something so that this can be captured and this can be linked to the sources, who are the people or communities whose knowledge it is? So we sort of started working on that, and this went on for good 2 years, and then we had sort of meetings with various government departments and ministries and so on, and we created sort of a general architecture for national indigenous knowledge of India, a database architecture, and then sort of the templates for bringing all this and sort of identifying. And it was then sort of the president's office was happy, and then it was passed on to the various departments, and then there was an internal fighting amongst the departments. Department of Culture said that it is ours. Department of IT said that this is technology, this is ours. Department of Education said that no, this is educational resource, this is for us. Department of Business said no, this can be used for business, this is ours. It never went through. Finally, after 3 years, I think we went back to the conference. Again, sort of the president didn't come at that time, but he had sent us a message through his scientific advisor, who was actually the then director of the Institute of Science in Bangalore. So he was his scientific advisor. So he said that finally, if you go through this once again, and this will be prime minister portfolio, and we like this, and the president office wants to push it, the prime minister is willing to accept it as his own departments and initiative. So we said, yeah, fine, this is political. So but we revised it and then again sort of submitted it. But then it never moved anywhere. It, as usual, created a National Knowledge Commission under the Prime Minister's office. But then the Prime Minister then was, what was his name? Singh.
Manmohan Singh.
Manmohan Singh.
Yeah.
Then he was he didn't win the election, and it died. So again, this is a good example that how people, and he was not from information science field, but he felt that there is something information science and technology can help in capturing this information and making this available with the right ownership. And then there could be a platform that can be used by other commercial interests or national interests or educational interests. But this resource has to be captured and accessible.
Yeah, and I was able to attend one talk by APJ Abdul Kalam when I was in Singapore, and he was the president of India, and he addressed like a huge crowd. I don't know, a few thousand people, maybe 2, 3,000 at least, and maybe it was in one of the Suntec City areas. I'm not sure. Yeah, and but what amazed me was that he was the president, and he was speaking like he was my math teacher or science teacher, and addressing a class of students and talking so normally. And I thought that he had absolutely no pride of being the president or being such a great person and all his achievements. He was there just talking human to human, and he's talking to his students, he's talking to people. And that was
Mhm.
like it was one of those learning moments for me as well as to how to be or how to conduct yourself in life, no matter what you achieve.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you earlier talked about how the Bangladesh war influenced your growing up. Were there any other incidents across over through your life that influenced you or shaped you?
Yes, I think this is again one of the things that we during my work in Africa, the first phase, and then later on, I started doing some research in Africa. I did two projects later, much later, with African colleagues. But when I went there, I think I we started working and trying to work with the the major government missionaries there. Which one was that they called it uh, OAU at that time, Organization of African Unity, which later on changed its name to become African Union, and the UN headquarters for Africa. Um, but because one of the mandates was that these, because it was set up by UNESCO, the School of Information Studies for Africa, we would go and train people about basics of internet and information, and some of the even sort of agenda with regard to these networks, and there was a Pan-African Development Information System called PADIS, and we used to sort of talk about that and teach about how to use them. But one thing that we realized that no matter how good your system is, the organizations and the politics behind it is always a big stumbling block. So there are kind of barriers that no matter how hard you try, the institutional bureaucracy, especially in some of these international organizations, is so difficult. I later on worked with the UN and the International Atomic Energy Agency, but that helped me because I said that sort of, I can only, as a consultant, I can only come up with my plan, and I will be happy to sort of discuss with you, revise it accordingly. But I will never take part in any implementation because I know that it will never go anywhere because of the institutional bureaucracy, because of the tension amongst various existing kind of nodes within the departments, and so on and so forth. So that was kind of one of the realizations that as a researcher, as an academic, you can do quite a lot of things. And again, this experience sort of was similar to what happened in India, that we all worked for free, an international team, to come up with something which was kind of officially accepted by the scientific commission there, but it never go anywhere. It never went anywhere. It was never allowed to go anywhere because of the political tensions.
Right.
So world is sort of the world of information. I think within within the high schools, if you know that there are three nodes: people, information, and technology. But I think there is a hidden node which is politics,
Okay.
and the current sort of political climate in different parts of the world and the things that are happening is a testament to that. Whether you take it the Ukraine war, whether you take it the Middle East crisis, or whether you take it what is happening in the US or in many other countries, but these are testament to how information can be used, abused, misused, or not used for political purposes.
Right.
And it's very frustrating for academics and researchers and scholars.
No, no, that's really, really interesting and important for people to note. So over the years, right, as part of your career until now, what are some of the key skills that you've developed that have helped you navigate all
I
this?
don't know whether I have really have any skills. That's a good question.
Of course you
Um,
you do. Yeah.
I think I would say people skills. If I really think of my journey, I moved to different countries and worked with different people. And I think the best things that is people skills, trying to understand and talk to people, engage with people at the same level where they are. And I have met with people from different continents of much, much better caliber than me, or sort of, holding much more powerful positions. But I think that's something that has been kind of a benefit for me to learn how to engage with people, how to kind of, share and understand their thoughts. And that led me to sort of, again, refocus on my research on how kind of people and society are extremely important, if not more important, than the technology. Developing a technology is not easier, I would say, but much less problematic than making it useful and successful in people and social contexts.
Right.
So this knowledge and people skills probably I'll claim as one of my um, skills. The other thing, there is one more, but I think that's very common. Most of our colleagues in the information science field have done that. You probably can see that through my career, through the publications that I have. I have tried to take the core ideas of information access, information retrieval, information sharing through different stages, like to from the early stages, computerized access, from then to digital libraries and open access, then sustainable access to information, equitable access to information. And in all of these, the society and societal needs and changes, as well as the technology and the evolution of technology, they both have a role to play. Probably that's something I would say as my skills that I learned along my way and
Right.
tried to adapt it.
And what do you think have been your biggest successes?
Mm, I think it's very difficult. Probably I don't have one yet to come.
So that's a good.
No, I think jokes apart. I think the one thing that you know I can see that information research has taken a turn that I started working at a long time ago, but I could not continue with that because the computing cost was very high. The computing power and cost parity changed over the years. Now, but I now, when the generative AI came, appeared, and then came as part of sort of, big revolution within the almost in every field, I then thought that, well, it was not a bad thing actually to do my research on natural language processing nearly 30 years ago. I could not continue because, as I said, that it's only big companies and sort of big organizations had that power. The power for training large training data sets was not easily available. They were very costly. But I at least feel, and then almost like this is a testament that the paper that I wrote in Arist, I think it was in 2003 2004, around that time, on natural language processing, has since been kind of used and cited very well, and then is getting still sort of some new citations, because now there is the natural language processing is almost like it is a rebirth of
Right.
natural language processing combined with neural network and sort of GPT, this transformers and so on. So that's something in a way, I also regret that if I knew that this power, or if there were opportunities, I probably could have done more along with other people on natural language processing. and that could have led to something interesting.
Right. And you talked about some of the difficult parts of the moments of your life. You talked about the passing of your father and some of those phases. So when you think of your life until now, what are the phases that have made you resilient? What are the hardest and challenging times that required you to be strongest and not break down under pressure?
Um, I think there have been some challenges that I expected, that there were quite a few were unexpected. One thing I told you, that a major life event happened in our family. My father suddenly passed away,
Right,
and suddenly, sort of, I felt that there was kind of a responsibility that came, and I was staying abroad with my PhD on my head. It took, and my younger brothers, the youngest one was still at school, high school, and the one after that was at college. So they were kind of both students, and sort of it became a big challenge for me, and I had to be resilient. The other challenge that I found was research in information science has always faced some major, it has always, I don't know whether what is your personal experience is, it has always sort of fallen between the stools in terms of funding, in terms of support, in terms of institutional recognition, and so on. And it is not only me, it's probably other leaders also in the field felt, and that gave birth to the I schools. Some of the I schools came, the then library and information schools came together to form a kind of a critical mass to demonstrate that. I'm sure you know the history of the I schools, that this, I school started, the seed was at that time the gang of three or gang of four, it was to begin with. They realized that there was a huge scope for the what do you call, the NSF round funding for digital libraries in the early 90s, and many of the library schools actually did not do well, or did not get big funding, simply because they didn't have the recognition, or they didn't have the critical mass, and that actually led to some of these I schools leaders then coming together and forming a consortium and trying to demonstrate and build a critical mass that led to some success in the second round of DLI funding. It is typical Digital Library Initiative, NSF DLI funding. And but this is one of the major challenges, so I had to always frustratingly experienced this and had to live with it, and had to always fight when as I became more senior and started taking senior roles, including head of department or director of research and things like that. That you have to tell the same story to everyone over and over again, to tell them who you are, what your research is, why your research is not computer science, why your research is not humanities, why your research is not social science, but it is information science.
right,
And the more sort of, challenges I faced, the more kind of, frustrated, but at the same time, I tried to become more prepared and argue and sort of, my case and try and demonstrate. This has remained one of the major challenges, even, when I eventually became the head of the chair of the I schools. I faced similar problems when I spoke to the deans of the largest I schools in the US. Some of them had their resources, some of them had their funding, but even it was difficult for the deans to convince their provosts and so on. And as a result, you have seen even some of the big names in the I schools in the US, they now have become more or less computer science, computer engineering department or merged. And because it was very difficult, even I would imagine, for those deans to argue and convince their provosts and the funding bodies. that information science is a field that itself can survive, can itself do research and do miracles. They always thought that, oh, you are maybe better suited here or there or somewhere else, but you cannot stand alone, you cannot do this. So this was one of my key kind of challenges, and I tried to become more and more resilient, and this can be reflected through the actions that I did. Was when I was in Australia, we tried to create a platform for the information science schools in the Asia Pacific region, training doctoral students with international expertise, so that even if they did not have resources, they could use the kind of piggyback on some of the conferences that were taking place. And I did the same thing. For example, when I became the high school's chair, the small research fund that we introduced, very small, but that is at least some seed fund that encourages some of our high school members to start doing some research. I was kind of ridiculed by some of the senior deans that I mean, this is a small amount of money. My students, let alone my students, faculties, nobody will apply for this.
Right.
But here, yes, yet we now can see that at least this is building up and we get some very good applications and so on. And this creates kind of a critical knowledge base. And over the years, this will show that iSchools have funded research in these areas and that will eventually grow. So, the more I faced these challenges and sort of, that what is your discipline? Your discipline is not this, not that. Where do you belong? It made me more resilient, and perhaps some of these things are reflected through some of the things that I do. I don't know. People will have to judge.
Sure. Yeah. And what is something you wish you knew earlier in your life?
One thing is obviously is that I wish that I knew that computing cost would reduce drastically.
Right.
I did not know, and that's why sadly I had to abandon natural language processing research because the wherever I wrote a proposal, the computing cost used to be so high and even not accessible, not available. The universities did not have HPC setup those days. So that was one thing. But the other thing that I think I wish I knew is that these global organizations would come up like the iSchools, like the modern ACIST as it stands now, not ACIST 20, 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
That as a global organization, as an organization with a voice. I wish that these organizations were there, and then it would make our journey a bit perhaps easier, smoother, perhaps.
Yeah. And what are your life principles, values that you follow? Like, what are your life lessons?
I think never give up, be resilient. Yes. One thing that I always tell my students and I've told my children, imagine that, you know, if our ancestors stopped standing or walking first time they tried and failed, we would have never been able to walk on this planet.
Right.
So you will fall, but stand up and try again and try again, and you will eventually succeed. Even if you do not succeed, you inspire other people not to give up.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. And what does happiness mean to you?
Mhm. This is more philosophical question. I think it changed over the years. Um, well, this probably common that happiness is when you see your children smiling, they're happy, that makes you very happy. But in your professional life, my happiness has been, for example, to see my students succeed. They are doing well.
Right.
Mm, and when I see a class full of students are happy, interacting with me, enjoying, rather than sitting there and trying to sort of watching their time and trying, hoping that if this will finish any time soon. So the happiness is when I come out of the class, if I get some good questions, if I see my students are interacting, or I'm giving a talk and I get some interesting questions, even challenging, that makes me happy rather than actually talking there.
Right.
That I could at least inspire some people, I could at least sort of encourage some people to ask questions, at least they're thinking.
Yeah. And what are your goals now?
Gosh, okay. Well, try and understand sort of, the rapid development of technology and trying to see how collectively we can demonstrate that the discipline of information science has a core role to play in today's data and AI driven world. Because one of the things that I have been trying to do here is to build impact case studies based on my research to demonstrate that my research on uh, this sustainable development or generative AI, um, or I have another area of work which is how older vulnerable people, how to promote digital access for older and vulnerable people. Of PhD students, and I have done quite a bit of writing about it. So trying to build impact case studies so that I can demonstrate to the university and also to sort of various other agencies and stakeholders that information science can really do life-changing things, can really empower people in achieving certain things. So that's something that I have been trying to do, and hopefully within the next couple of years, I'll be able to build a portfolio of impact case studies that will demonstrate that yes, information science people do some research which is useful to society.
Oh, thank you. And my last question is like, what mentoring advice would you have for people who might follow in your footsteps?
I don't know whether anyone will follow my footsteps. But I think, as I said, that my life's principle has been that, never give up, try and ask questions, always sort of, be willing to take challenges because research journey is quite challenging. And that's why it is research. You never know, it is not actually delivering a project where you know what the final outcome will be and you already have the specification before you start. Research is something, an unknown, uncharted territory. You have a rough idea as to where it goes. And any research, especially in today's world, the rate at which technology and society changes, you may have to make adjustments as you go along. And therefore, sort of be resilient, be willing to sort of, adapt, but yet sort of, always keep trying and try and not only alone, but try and encourage people around you so that you can achieve something. When we were young, well, that's the wrong way of putting it. There is, I don't know whether you know, there is a Bengali, how do I put it? Swami Vivekananda.
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So his guru was Ramakrishna Dev.
Um,
Yes.
yeah.
What he said is very interesting. And my father used to always tell us, and that has become kind of, the Bengali is, if I translate it, leave your mark behind.
Hmm.
Okay, leave
Yeah.
your mark behind so that people don't remember you. People remember what you have done or your mark. So if you I always would tell that try and do something so that when you are not here or when you moved on, people can see the mark that you have left behind, and that will be an example for other people.
No, that's amazing. And were there other things that you wanted to talk about that we did not cover? Anything else?
No, it's been really sort of a nice conversation with you. Surprisingly, it took us uh, 25 years to talk to each other
Right.
when we were at the same time in Singapore in the same
In the same
school,
university, same school. Yeah. I
same
think
school, same building. It has been really nice talking to you, and it's been a nice experience. And I'm always sort of open to sort of any conversations, anything that where I may make any kind of, way, any contribution towards how to progress information science research. It may not be in my area of specialization, but even if I could be sort of, makes any comments, any advice, any suggestions, I'm always open and would be happy to do that because sort of I have little more time now than I had before when children were at home and young. So
no, thank you so much, Govinda. I have learned so much through this interview, and it's really been amazing getting to know you. And you're such a wonderful person, and you're so humble and down to earth despite all your achievements. So I feel really blessed to be able to talk to you.
thank you. That it was a sort of great pleasure for me as well, and sort of nice talking to you.
Thank you, Govinda. So I will stop the interview now.